In November 1923, a loaf of bread in Germany cost 200 billion marks. Workers were paid twice a day because by lunchtime, the morning's wages were already worthless. People burned paper money to heat their homes because it was cheaper than wood. This is the story of how a modern, educated, industrial nation destroyed its own currency. Most people think hyperinflation is something that happens to poor, unstable countries, to failed states, to banana republics, but in 1921, Germany was none of those things. It was one of the most advanced industrial nations on earth, home to some of the greatest scientists, engineers, and philosophers in history, a country with a sophisticated banking system, a literate population, and a rich cultural tradition. And within 2 years, its currency was worth less than the paper it was printed on. This is not just a German story, it is a warning for every nation that has ever been tempted to print its way out of a problem. To understand how this happened, you have to go back to 1918 and a war that Germany had just lost and a bill that it could never afford to pay. Emotion map, curious guy, one board fired, debt one board fired, teen 430. When World War I ended in November 1918, Germany had financed the entire war through borrowing, not taxes. Debt, 26 billion marks of national debt by 1918. The government had promised its people that when Germany won, the conquered nations would pay the bill. Germany didn't win, and then came the Treaty of Versailles, 3 times 2 billion gold marks and more reparations. Payable to France, Britain, and the Allies, not in paper marks. In gold-backed currency, its industrial heartland was damaged, its workforce was depleted, its trade routes were disrupted, and now it had to pay a bill larger than its entire pre-war national income. The Weimar Republic, Germany's fragile new democratic government, faced an impossible choice: cut spending so brutally that the economy collapsed, or print money. They printed money. At first it seemed to work. The economy kept moving, people had jobs, the marks kept flowing, but there was a problem building beneath the surface, a problem that would become impossible to ignore in 1923. In January 1923, Germany failed to deliver reparations payments, specifically called for the 35th time in 36 months. France and Belgium had had enough. They sent troops into the Ruhr Valley, Germany's industrial heartland, to take the coal by force. The German government responded with a general strike. Workers in the Ruhr downed tools. Factories stopped, production halted. And the Weimar government decided to pay the striking workers with printed money. The printing presses ran day and night. By mid-1923, Germany was producing so much paper currency that the government had to hire 300 paper mills and 100 printing companies just to keep up with demand. And as more marks flooded into the economy, each mark became worth less, which meant prices rose, which meant that the government had to print more to pay its bills, which meant each mark became worth even less. The spiral was self-reinforcing, and it accelerated faster than anyone had ever seen. In January 1923, $1 bought 15 marks. By July, just 6 months later, $1 bought 353,000 marks. By September, 98 million marks. By November 1923, 4.2 trillion marks. 4,200 billion marks for $1. Here's what this meant for ordinary Germans, not economists, not bankers, the woman who ran the bakery, the man who had saved his whole life for retirement, the family that thought they had done everything right. Workers were paid twice a day, once at midday, once at the end of the shift. Their wives met them at the factory gate at noon, took the morning's wages, and ran to the shops, because by afternoon those same marks would buy half as much. Restaurants stopped printing menus, because prices changed between the time you ordered and the time the food arrived. Shopkeepers wrote new price tags every few hours. People burned banknotes in their fireplaces, because paper money was cheaper than firewood. Children played with stacks of worthless bills, building towers and brick walls from currency. And the German middle class, the doctors, lawyers, teachers, civil servants who had saved their entire lives, was annihilated. A pension built over 40 years of careful saving could not buy a single loaf of bread. The psychological damage was profound and permanent. Germans who lived through 1923 never trusted paper money again. They never trusted banks again. They never fully trusted the government again. And that mistrust, that deep generational wound, helped create the political conditions for something far worse. The hyperinflation of 1923 didn't directly cause the rise of Adolf Hitler, but it shattered the faith of an entire nation in its institutions. And when the Great Depression struck in 1929, that shattered faith had nowhere left to go, except toward a man who promised to make Germany great again. The Weimar Hyperinflation was ended in November 1915. A new currency, the Rentenmark, was introduced, backed by mortgage bonds on agricultural land. The old marks were exchanged at a rate of 1 trillion old marks per one new Rentenmark, 1 trillion to 1. Every person who had saved in the old currency lost everything in a single exchange rate. The hyperinflation lasted 734 days. It destroyed the savings of an entire generation. It destabilized one of the most advanced democracies in the world, and it paved the road to one of the darkest chapters in human history. Now here's the question history asks us. Could it happen again today? The United States has printed more money in the last 5 years than in its entire previous history. Japan owes 236% of GDP. The global financial system is running on debt, trust, and the belief that central banks know what they are doing. The Germans of 1920 believed the same thing, subscribed to empire collapse, because the most dangerous economic disaster in history didn't start with a crash. It started with a printing press and a government that told its people everything would be fine.